going to be going live. Yeah, and we are going to record it as a backup just in case. Okay, with that, Mina, I'm looking forward to your presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me. Let me go ahead and start with sharing my screen and rearranging a few things here. All right. Let's do this. So you're able to see my slides, I presume?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, great. So today we're going to talk about reproducible publishing with Quarto. So I am Mina Chitinkara-Rendell. I am a professor at Duke University, and I am also a developer educator at Posit. So part of what I will share with you today is my experience with Quarto, sort of from its early development days and working alongside the development team. And part of what I'll share is from my my academic life, where I use Quarto for teaching. I teach Quarto to students, and I also use it to, publish articles and make course websites, so on and so forth. So let's first start with what is Quarto. In a nutshell, Quarto is a new open source scientific and technical publishing system. I'm saying new, although the original release of Quarto was over the summer, and the development of it has taken place for about a year prior to that. So I would maybe call it new-ish at this point. And it aims to make the process of creating and collaborating dramatically better. So here's sort of a schematic of what's going on. We're starting with some computing language, and it could be R, it could be Python, it could be Observable or Julia, or really more. There's no limit to which language you could be using it with. You could be using it with a language that doesn't exist today, is sort of the idea behind it. And the Quarto engine will take code in addition to prose in sort of either Jupyter Notebook format or in plain text Markdown, and render an output to HTML or PDF or a Word or more. And when I say or more, there's really a wealth of output options, and we'll talk about a few of those today. And then I'll sort of point you to resources for learning about other output options as well. For talking to the R community about Quarto, I think it's important to sort of acknowledge the role and the place of R Markdown. Quarto really unifies and extends the R Markdown ecosystem. And for me, as an R user, this is an ecosystem I have sort of not just loved, but also relied on heavily over the last, decade or so of using R. It unifies this ecosystem for people who love R Markdown, I would say, and it also extends it for people who don't know R Markdown. So if you're coming to this from non-R Markdown user perspective, knowing R Markdown is certainly not a prerequisite for working with Quarto, but if you do know about it, you'll see lots of similarities, and you'll also start quickly to recognize some differences as well. So what do I mean by it unifies and extends it? So in a way, it provides a consistent implementation of attractive and handy features across outputs. For example, tab sets or code folding or syntax highlighting. If you are an R Markdown user, you know that the way these work in different outputs, say in Change and Slide Deck versus an R Markdown document versus blog down, is slightly different, to the point that where in some of the outputs they're not necessarily available, at least not by default. Quarto also has more accessible defaults, as well as better support for accessibility. One really nice thing, particularly as someone who teaches folks who are just learning programming alongside learning Quarto, is that it has guardrails, which are particularly helpful for new learners. So we'll demo in a second how when you're writing sort of code chunk options, for example, you can leverage YAML completion. It has informative syntax errors that will point you to where the issues might be. And finally, it has support for other languages, as I said, like Python, Observable, and more. And the way that works is that in addition to being able to use the knitter engine for executable code chunks, you can also use the Jupyter engine in a Quarto document as well. So that's sort of an overview of Quarto, but I feel like it stays, very high level. So what I'd like to do is actually dive in and see Quarto in action. So I am going to go to this GitHub repository next. So let's go ahead and do that. And if you are interested, I am also going to put this in the chat as well, if you would like to follow along. Is there a problem with the audio?
A little bit of issues with the sound. I'm not sure if you need to adjust your mic or anything.
Let's see what I can do. Let's see. Is this any better? Maybe.
It sounds good now.
Okay. Yeah. Let's try this then. Okay. All right. Wonderful. Thanks for letting me know. So you'll see in this repository that I have two files with the extension QMD, which are Quarto files. So that's index.qmd and talk.qmd. And we're going to focus on this index.qmd file. So I am actually going to open that file and show you my RStudio window here. And if you would like to follow along, feel free to clone the repository and follow along with me, or sort of sit back and watch the demo. And then what we do during the demo, I will also push those changes at the end of the talk so that you can get access to those as well. So we have this file called index.qmd as opposed to rmd for those of you who are Markdown users. And I am editing it using the RStudio visual editor. So in this editor, you can see that it's sort of a what you see is what you get situation. My headings are sort of larger and bold. I have hyperlinks. I have bolded this text. And what I can do is I can go to the source version of this document and I can see the same text in plain text markdown as well. So what the visual editor does is it allows me to edit a document using more of a what you see is what you get experience, either using the toolbar or keyboard shortcuts that should be familiar to you. And then it basically, when I make a change, when I make a change and save that change, you can see that on the source side, that actually has been implemented in plain text markdown, which is really neat because I can have this more sort of familiar editing experience, but I can still easily version control my files. Let's go ahead and render this document. And before I render the document, I am going to choose this option to preview my document in the viewer pane so that it doesn't show up as a pop-up, but it shows up on the viewer pane on the other side of my RStudio window. All right. So we can basically see here the rendered document, which in addition to having the code, also has the output of the code embedded in it. Now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about chunk options. First of all, what if I wanted to, for example, hide the chunk option, hide the code from my output? I can add a new chunk option. You can see that I am using the YAML style chunk options or that are sort of denoted with the hash pipe. So the hash symbol and then the pipe. And the chunk option for hiding code is echo. So I will start typing echo and I can tab and I can see sort of the YAML completion here helping me. And I'm going to say echo false. Let's also check this box that says render on save so that every time I save my document, RStudio renders it for me.
So we will see here that that one chunk is hidden, which is the neat thing here is we're able to use what we know from our markdown, the same chunk options. We are denoting them a little bit differently, not with an equal and then capital letters, but all lowercase, but we are able to make use of the YAML completion to help us with that. I will give a mini teaching tip here. One of my favorite options in these like newer knitter options is this fenced option. So eco fenced will basically print the code, but also the fences around it. So if you are teaching Quarto and you want to sort of show people what code chunks look like in a rendered document, this is really neat without having to fake this markdown for the code chunk options. And you can see that it's pretty smart. It will hide this one, but show all the other chunk options for you. So we had here an option of a chunk level option to hide the code. Let's take that back and let's think about a situation where I might want to hide the code in my entire document. So that means that I might want to actually pass some global options. That is actually something I can do all the way in the YAML, not in a specific code chunk, but under an YAML field called execute. And again, the YAML completion is helping me pick what I need. So I'm going to say I want false for that, and I'll save the document, and we'll be able to see that now I can obtain a report with none of the code, which might be helpful if I'm, sharing this sort of with an audience that doesn't want to see the code. In fact, I can also say that I want the warnings to be false as well. So that we can get rid of that warning about the 2 NAs in our Palmer Penguins data set too. Another option that we can use is adding alternative text to our figures. And I want to use this to sort of highlight, I want to demo this to highlight a few things. One, how easy it is to add alternative text to your figures. So this is going to be a figure option. So it starts with fig, and I'm going to choose alt. And you can imagine that this is going to be a somewhat lengthy text that I will enter here. So let's go ahead and write some alternative text. So we have a scatter plot of bill depth versus length of 3 species of penguins. These are Adelie, Chinstrap, and Gentoo. There is a positive, linear, and moderately strong relationship for each of the species, or something like this. So we have some statement about what the plot is and some statement about what we can get out of the plot. You can see that this is starting to look pretty messy. So what I might do is I will do a couple things here. I am going to go to my options for RStudio, my global options, and I will say under code and display that I want to see the margin. So let's go ahead and apply that. So it shows me the margin. So you can see a faint gray line here at 80 characters. That's generally where I like to break my code. And I will use the vertical line here to signify that I'm going to have a multi-line chunk option. And we can basically add line breaks after these, and things start to look a lot more, a lot neater as we do this. And you can see that this alternative text obviously is not visible in my output, because it's not meant to be visible to necessarily somebody consuming the document, its rendered document. But if we right click on this and say inspect element, or actually, let's do this. Instead of doing that, let's pop this out to a browser window so we can see it bigger. And let's go ahead and inspect this element. You can see that the alternative text that I've written is actually encoded into the HTML, so a screen reader can access it and read it out loud for somebody who's navigating the document via a screen reader. All right, so we have demoed a couple chunk options, one that's a bit more text-based and one that's more about how the chunk is displayed to us. Now let's go ahead and do something about references. So generally, we tend to, when we write documents like this, we'll say something like the figure below is a, well, this should say scatter plot of species of penguins. If we wanted to insert a cross-reference here, where we have something like figure 1, 2, and then it's hyperlinked, I would need to do two things. One is I would need to change my chunk label to start with the suffix fig so that Quarto knows that this is going to be a figure that might be referenced. And then I would also need to add a new option, a caption. So let's just say, maybe I'm going to copy this text just as a placeholder here for my caption. So now I have a document with a figure that's being generated in a code chunk with a label that starts with the letters fig and a caption for that figure as well. So now I can say, instead of the figure below, I can go to insert and citation. Whoops, sorry, not citation. Insert and cross-reference. And you can see that my figure is already visible here to be selected. So I'll just double click that and re-render this document. And we'll see that Quarto will do its thing, insert the cross-reference, and also give it a caption as well. Let's do something similar for the table too. So underneath here, I have a table that says the table below. Once again, I need to modify the label, and this time I will use the suffix TBL for table. And I need to add a caption as well. So that is going to be a table cap, and maybe let's say something like first 10 rows of the penguins data set. And let's try a different way for inserting this reference. So right now I have my code chunk ready to be cross-referenced, or my table ready to be cross-referenced. And so I am going to delete the text here instead of saying the table below. And I am going to use the insert anything tool in the visual editor. So I'm currently clicking on the / to bring up this menu that allows me to choose between some handy tools. I want to cross-reference, so I start typing the beginning of that, and that basically brings up the document for, I have not saved my document, sorry about that. Let's go ahead and do that one more time. All right, so let's try this again. I want a cross-reference. Something is bizarre. Let's try this, and I will come back to looking at that. I have lost my cross references. What just happened? TBL, and I have it. Oh, sorry about that. The issue. Well, we'll now get to see me debug this in real time, I suppose. There we go. I'm not really sure what the issue was, but we are able to see the table to be selected now. And so I can insert that here, and it will start counting, start a new counter for my tables as well. And I can customize how these links are shown. Like if I wanted to be shortened or have all capital letters or something, those are all things that you can customize. But so far, we've talked about modifying chunk options. We've talked about cross-references. And before we move on from documents to a different output format, I would like to show one more thing, which is the how citations work. So in this document, we are working with the Palmer Penguins data set. And this data set actually comes from a paper that we can reference here. So let's go ahead and say that I want to insert a citation. So I'm using the insert anything tool here again. And I am going to say I want to insert this citation from a DOI. And let's go ahead and type the DOI of the paper that I want to reference. You can see that I can hook this up to other services like Crossref or PubMed, or I can actually, if I have a personal Zotero library, I can connect it here as well. I'm just going to show you the DOI approach here, and let's go ahead and insert this citation. A few things happened. One, I have a new line in the YAML of my document that basically references a new file called references.bib. I can see that a citation has been added where I inserted it. And if I go in my files pane, I can see this new file being created. And I can sort of see the bib citation for this document here. If you've used things like BibTeX before, this format should look very familiar. Chances are you may have had to copy and paste this from somewhere before, but with this tool, the visual editor will pull all of this information for you. So let's go ahead and render this document one more time to see how things look. And now I see that I have my text followed by my citation. If I hover over it, I can see the full citation. If I scroll down, I have a new section called references, and I am able to sort of see the list of references at the bottom of my document as well. So something that used to be pretty cumbersome, and now we can sort of do it in a pretty straightforward way. So we've talked a little bit about documents. Let's make one change. This has been an HTML document so far. What do things look like if we change the output to something like PDF? So I'm going to go from format HTML to format PDF in my documents YAML. And one neat thing is that the RStudio viewer will actually show the PDF in the viewer pane as opposed to popping out a new PDF for you. And we can see that our references work the same, our citations work the same, our cross-references work the same. We haven't really had to do many changes between our HTML output and our PDF output. Now let's change things a bit more though. You know, going from HTML to PDF and things looking pretty similar is not that revolutionary, I think. But what if we wanted to make a slide deck from this? Let's go ahead and make some HTML-based slides with Reveal.js as our format. So I am only going to change what's in my documents YAML. And you can see that RStudio will prompt me to say, we're changing the markdown format. Let's reload the visual editor. So let's say yes, but I haven't had to make any changes to my syntax. And let's go ahead and render this document. All right, so my document title has now become my slide deck sort of title of my presentation. My headings are now slide headings. and I can see sort of my output in exactly the same way here, except my reference is being cut off because it hasn't been moved to a new slide. But this is still a pretty big win that we are able to see our, without changing anything in our text, we're able to go from a plain single document to a slide deck. Let's do a little bit of reorganization though. If I look in my document outline over here, I'll be able to see that these are each second level headings. So what I am going to do is insert some first level headings. So how about we say a first level heading that says introduction, and then let's insert another one, a first level heading that maybe says analysis, and maybe I have a slide in here, which we're not going to necessarily write, modeling results. I'll put some ... here. And then let's also add another slide called references so that that last slide can go over there. We can see how my slide deck is now organized neatly in my document outline. And that same document outline is going to be reflected in the sort of the hamburger menu at the bottom of my Quarto slides over here. And so I can see the same outline as well, and I can easily jump to them. You can see that this tool also will bring up a list of tools. I can do something like speaker view, get a slide overview, or even very neatly get a PDF export mode, for example, that I can easily print. All right, so let's go ahead and make a few other changes. I am going to go ahead and first of all say that I want my, let's say that I want to actually show my code. So let's go ahead and render this document with echo true. This is particularly useful if you're teaching any code or demoing any code. You might actually want to have your code in your slides. Let's go ahead and maybe refresh this. All right, we were stuck in this. Let me go ahead and relaunch this project real quick. Always the joys of live demoing. Okay, so let's go ahead and render this slide deck one more time. There we go. Some code here looks good. And now over here, what's happening is reveal is being helpful, right? It's showing me my code, and it is then squishing my figure to whatever space is available, which is not very helpful. So what could I do to sort of help with this? One of the things that I could do is I could say, well, how about we make the text a little smaller, maybe make a little bit more room for our figure. Using custom CSS, you can do everything imaginable for your slide deck. But something that's pretty neat is using the visual editor. If I sort of click on the line where my header is, these three little dots will appear, and that allows me to sort of write some CSS on the fly, including using some custom classes that I may have written or that are available by default. One of my favorite ones as a quick hack is the .smaller class, which will take the text in that slide and make it a little bit smaller. This is oftentimes helpful if you have a lot of text on a slide, which is not always great practice, but it's helpful to sort of make everything fit into one. This is an improvement. It's still not great though, right? So I have a couple other options. One of the things that you might want to do here, for example, is place your code in one column of your slide and place your text in the other column of your slide. Inserting multi-column content to slides is pretty straightforward in Quarto. So let's go ahead and add a new slide. I'm going to do heading 2, slide with columns. And then I can, again, using the insert anything tool, say I want 2 slide columns, content in column 1, content in column 2. I might even, if I want, make one of them narrower and the other one wider. And so let's take a look to see what that looks like. So we can see that the slide with columns looks something like this. And if I quickly switch over to the source editor, you can see that I have saved myself a lot of trouble in sort of remembering the syntax for how to create columns. Not that it is very cumbersome syntax, but personally, I find it difficult to remember these things on the fly. So I really like the visual editor for being able to insert these commonly used tools very easily. The thing is, even though I can easily insert columns, if you've ever tried to do this with either our Markdown, for example, and wanted to have code in one column and the output elsewhere, you would have to create 2 code chunks that reference each other with the ref label code chunk option. Well, there's something a little bit easier you can do with Quarto. We can actually add a new chunk option called outputs location. And I can say either column or even column fragment. So let's take a look at what that does. So it's going to put my code in one column and my output in the other column. And the fragment bit basically says that when I advance, the output will be available to me. I can also change this to be, if I needed my figure to be even bigger, I can change the output location to be slide. And then I will be able to, it will actually create a new slide for me with that output, which I think is really, really handy. Another neat code chunk option is code line numbers. This is particularly helpful if you're teaching. So let's go ahead and go back to our code. Let's say that I want to say something like, I want to talk a little bit about aesthetic mappings, which are between lines 3 to 6. And then I want to say something about the scale colorblind layer. So that is lines 3 to 6, separated by hash, and then line 10. So if we go ahead and render this, it will first show me my code and then highlight only those specific lines for me. And the neat thing about this is that I haven't had to actually insert any syntax or any characters into my code itself, which means that if I was to now go back to making this a HTML document, so not slides anymore, even though the code line numbers is something that only makes sense in the slide context, it sort of silently doesn't get applied in the HTML context, but I also don't get any errors about it, which is, I think, really nice. So we've gone from an HTML document to a slide deck back to an HTML document. And right now in my folder, I have 2 Quarto files, the index.qmd that I've been working with so far. And then I also actually have my talk slides that I walked you through at the beginning. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do just a little bit of cleanup. Let's go ahead and remove any of the output. So HTML or PDF output or any folders that contain anything related to my output so that I can show you sort of a clean project folder where I have an RStudio project, a README, a references bib file that I need for my HTML document, and 2 source documents. One of them are my Reveal.js slides, and then the other one is this document that we've been building up so far. So a project with 2 documents, and the next and last thing we're going to demo is putting these together in a Quarto project as a website. Are there any questions? I think I'm hearing something, but I'm not sure. All right, so in order to bring these together into a Quarto project, I need to create a new file, a text file that has to be named very specifically as _Quarto.yml. And this is, let's see, it sounds like maybe somebody needs to be muted. All right, maybe that's done. Okay, so let's create a project. The type of the project is going to be a website. You can see that we can choose a book here as well, but I'm going to select website. And then I am going to write, let's give it a title, maybe Hello Quarto. And what we want to do is have a navigation bar at the top of our website. And on the left, I want to link to index.qmd, and I want to link to talk.qmd. So those are the 2 files that I have. So I've created this document, this YAML document that sort of tells Quarto how to put things together. You can see that in RStudio right now, I don't have a specific way of being able to render this as a project. So I am going to relaunch my RStudio project simply by selecting that project one more time. And when I relaunch my project with the Quarto file in here that says, hey, this is a website, I gain a new tab called the Build tab, or the Build pane. And in here, I have an option to render my website. So let's go ahead and render our website. And voila, we have a website with 2 documents, the Hello Penguins document we have been working with, and my talk slides that I was walking you through earlier. And we've been able to basically create this web page with both of these. Let's talk about maybe one quick website option here. You can see that the titles on the navigation bar are basically taken from my the titles of these documents, but we might want to give them something a little more informative. So we might want to say that, hey, these are what we want you to link to. But let's call this demo, and let's call this slides. So let's go ahead and render our website one more time. And we can now see that on our website, the titles are basically come from the text fields in this YAML file, as opposed to the titles that are in our document. Before we wrap up this website demo, I want to show you one more feature, and this particular feature actually is a pre-release feature. So right now I am using a pre-release version of Quarto, and I'd like to highlight one of the upcoming features that you'll have access to. So everything I have shown so far are things that are available to you in either in the released version. but we're going to go to our index.qmd file, and we are going to say that for the format, yes, I want it to be HTML, but I also want multi-format output. So I want it to be PDF as well. And so I have, and remember that this document exists in a website, and we're basically saying, I want an HTML and a PDF of this document. Let's go ahead and uncheck this box here and render our website all together one more time. Right, so there's a question here, and thank you, Priyanka, for answering. One of the documents is an HTML document, and the other one is a Reveal.js document. So you can see that on my website now. I actually have my HTML document, but here on the side, the PDF shows as other formats, and if I click on it, I'm able to see a PDF version of that same document as well. This is very handy if you want to host your documents as HTML, but want to make it possible to be downloaded in another format, for example. So as I said, this feature, this multi-format output feature will be available with Quarto 1.3 onwards. So a single document, check. Slide deck, check. We have a website. The last piece is publishing this website. Any method you know of publishing a website is available to you with Quarto as well. So for example, if you use GitHub Pages, you could do that too. But the method that I would like to demo here is using QuartoPub. So far, I have used Quarto in the RStudio IDE and have made use of the visual editor and the various panes like the build pane for getting everything. But for publishing, I am actually going to move over to my terminal. And I am going to say Quarto publish. And this will prompt me asking, where would you like to publish it to? I would like to publish to QuartoPub. I have already connected my account, so that's why it shows it to me. If this is your first time publishing, it would prompt you to create an account on QuartoPub. So I'll say, yes, this is it. It's asking me what the published URL should be. Oops, sorry. Let's try this one more time. Yes. This site. Oh, I see. So I already have a website called Hello Quarto. So it's saying I can't do that for you. So how about we say Hello Quarto SLC-RUG, and it is creating my website. So it's rendering the website one more time. And then it's going to publish it for me, and I'll be able to share the link with you where then you can take a look at the published document and the slides as well. And here we go. And I will put this link here in the chat. We can see that we have a live website, and the link to my slides are here too. So that concludes our demo, but let's sort of pick up where we left off in terms of our slide deck. So we've been talking about Quarto, and I'm aware that I'm talking to an audience of R users, where as an R user, I generally think of things as R packages. Well, Quarto is not an R package. It is a command line interface, and it really basically orchestrates each step of the rendering. So we start with a QMD file, and so far, We've used the knitter engine. I haven't had to specify it because I'm using R code chunks. Quarto knows to use that. But if I was using Python or other language code chunks, it would be using the Jupyter engine, which then creates a plain text markdown document that goes through a pandoc to create the sort of the beautiful outputs that we've seen so far. If you would like to learn more about Quarto, I would recommend heading to quarto.org. If this is your first time with Quarto, I recommend going to the Get Started menu, and there you can sort of choose your favorite editor. So if that's RStudio, you would click here and it would walk you through a tutorial for like a welcome tutorial for computations and then authoring as well. Or if your favorite tool is something else, say like Jupyter, you can walk through the same tutorial there as well. If one thing to look forward to, as I said, is there's an upcoming release of Quarto 1.3. There are some pre-release notes you might look into. This may be particularly relevant if you've been a Quarto user for a while. And I highly recommend following the Quarto blog. Charlotte Wickham has been posting, starting this week, updates on upcoming Quarto 1.3 features. And whenever there are exciting updates in Quarto, there's usually going to be an accompanying blog post here as well. And thank you very much. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mina. That was a fantastic talk. I look forward to using some of these new features. There was a good question by Jim. He asks, I usually mix R Markdown plus LaTeX in QMD files. Can this lead to trouble?
No trouble. You absolutely can do the same. Just like you have used LaTeX in our Markdown documents, you can use it in exactly the same way in Quarto documents as well.
Is there any care that needs to be taken, like, because it may not be, it may not translate, like if it's like styling or stuff, but math should translate over just fine. But to what extent can you mix LaTeX and I guess that's a pandoc question, maybe.
It is ultimately a pandoc question, correct? That is correct. But you can, you can have theorem environments, lemma environments, like all of that stuff is available. And if you're inserting LaTeX, so using this insert anything tool, you can either insert like inline math or display math. And the nice thing is it will start to sort of preview it for you as you type as well. LaTeX can break easily, I will say, but that's not necessarily in relationship to Quarto. It just means that you want to be watching out for your curly braces and stuff. So I have certainly done, taught a regression course with slides I've made with Quarto, for example, and have not had trouble with it. But I am sure there are edge cases with pandoc where you run into issues.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. Lots of compliments here. This one's rather specific, I think. Let's see. This is from Toyanola. Thank you for this great talk. I have had challenges getting HTML documents to render when they contain SF objects mapped with ggplot2 geom SF. Any tips?
No specific tips. What I can only say is that I would not expect the behavior to be any different between any other computational document, like say our Markdown versus Quarto. I can say that I have successfully rendered things with geom SF, but I should also admit that I don't use it very heavily. So I will make some maps sometimes. So I don't know of like a immediate sort of clash. But it's also not something I have a lot of experience with.
Okay. Next question. Once you create your Quarto profile, you can have multiple blogs on it too?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to quarto.pub. So here is my sort of, so far it looks like I've published 8 things. As you can see, some of them are websites, some of them are slide decks. So yes, you can have multiple things. The only constraint, as you saw, was that they can't have the same name, because then that would result in the same URL.
Okay. I love this next question from Rebecca Barter. Thank you. Thanks for a great talk, Mine. Is there a way to send someone a nicely rendered Quarto rendered .html file without having to also send the underscore files folder?
Yes, absolutely. And we do that with embed resources. So I will show you how I will remind myself how it works. Something you add to the YAML. The keywords you might look for are either self-contained. So these would be called self-contained documents. And we can see that that's something we need to actually say under the HTML field. So let's go ahead and do that here. So instead of default, what I would do is I would say embed resources true. So that would actually encode all the images and stuff. It's what I use for my students' homework assignments, for example, so they can end up with a single HTML.
Yeah, it does create a larger file. I have to do that to pull reports and stuff off of the secure VA systems. Let's see, next question. Is there a way to convert a Zaringen, I'm not sure I'm saying that right, presentation to Reveal.js Quarto?
So I think that question and a later one here, I'm saying an existing RMD file to QMD, there isn't a way as in like a function you can run to convert them so far, at least not to my knowledge, and not something that's provided in Quarto. One thing I will say though is that in Knitter there is a function that will let's see, the Knitter R package. Let's see if we can get quickly to the Knitter references. There is a function for changing the chunk options from the R Markdown style to the newer hash pipe style. I'm not coming across the function as quickly as I would like here, but you can take a look at that. But there isn't one for actually converting an entire document. So I personally have been doing this myself, sort of semi-manually, let's say, with a lot of Control F and then replace all sort of things so far.
Okay, now correct me if I'm wrong, but Quarto wouldn't have a problem just running an RMD file through it. So if it's using Knitter and all the programs, I mean, technically the only difference would be is RMD file extension versus QMD file extension.
RMD, yes. So a simple HTML document, or not simple, an HTML document, yes, you would have no problem rendering it with Quarto. So we can have a .rmd file that we render with Quarto. Shuriken files are different though. So Quarto does not render Shuriken files.
Okay. Can you publish private Quarto sites with a login?
Answer is yes. Because I've recently come across a question. Somebody was asking about this. I don't know off the top of my head exactly how. I have not done that before. I do know that it is possible, though.
A follow-up to the embedded HTML. I usually just right-click the web page and save as HTML. When I want an HTML file to send to someone, is that missing things if I don't have embed-resources set to true?
It should be missing things. Yes, it should be missing the figures because it would be referencing the figures as opposed to having them embedded. And if you've used any custom styling, it would be missing those as well.
My experience with this is that it can definitely be missing things depending on the on what you're using to save it as. It will also often create a separate folder when you save that web page that includes all of those style sheets and images and things like that. But it may not. your mileage may vary on that. It would be better to like print it to a PDF or something to send to someone. But the real option, best option is to embed the resources if you're going to be sending it encapsulated to someone.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Mina, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions coming in, I think we'll end here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
End the recording if I can figure out how to. Okay, and